Today, as you all know, and you can see right there on your screen, generating demand in a tough market. And we do have Thomas Manning from Star Performance Marketing there. And I think before we jump in, we at Lead Helm and Helm Academy are all about how do we get more appointments from our digital traffic? How do we actually sell more vehicles and do it in a way that delivers an exceptional customer experience? That's everything that we're focused on. But for you to be successful with lead follow-up and lead conversion, we got to have demand, right? We can't, if we don't have leads, we don't have any follow-up, we don't have any digital sales process, we don't have anything. So we're going to work on the front side of the process today with Thomas and talk about the demand generation piece of it. And we go back, Thomas and I don't know, almost 10 years probably. And we work, Thomas and I, and in our Harley stores work very closely together. We were actually the first Harley group. I think that Thomas and his company branched out of the automotive space into it with us back in the day. So long-term relationship with Thomas as a friend and as a business partner. And he and his company, I can say this with complete confidence, they are really at the forefront and I would say thought leaders when we look at advertising and marketing inside not only power sports, but also automotive and marine. So tremendous resource that we have with us today for the topic of demand generation. So I'm going to turn it over here in a minute to Thomas, but just a quick glance at what we're going to cover today. Right, we're going to talk about what is a tough market and what is demand on the basic things, and then we're really going to get into some of the practical side and the applicable pieces from Thomas's point of view on what can we be doing to maximize what's happening right now. And I think just to kind of frame the discussion, we see some toughness in markets, right? I've been looking at some data here this week. Particularly out of the Harley Davidson side, and we're seeing some revenue challenges and some unit volume challenges, and maybe a challenge with mix. We're seeing a bit of margin compression, and we're seeing operating profit as a percentage and in terms of dollars a bit marginalized over the last couple of years. Lead counts are varying, cost per lead going up, transactional numbers down a bit, not everywhere, but some. There are a few pockets where we see anomalies, but for the most part, it's a bit more of a challenging year than we've had certainly in the past 3+ years. So with that said, the value of any lead has always been important, but is absolutely critical at present. People have interest. How do we engage with them early? How do we influence their journey early and often? And how do we win that customer to actually have an appointment and come into the store and do business with us? So that's where we are right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Thomas. Thomas, feel free to do a bit more of a detailed intro. And then in general, guys, you're going to hear more from Thomas than me today. He is the expert on this. I'll be driving the slides and I'll have maybe a couple little questions or some little wrap-up comments as we go through each segment. But without further ado, Thomas Manning, Star Performance Marketing, welcome.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I know probably 75–80% of you on the call. For those who I don't know, my name is Thomas Manning. I'm the Vice President for Star Performance Marketing. And as you will be able to tell as I go through, I'm born and raised in North Carolina, so I still sound like a North Carolina boy. I live in Florida now, but I can never, that DNA is in there. But our agency has been in business roughly 18 years. But me personally, I actually started in advertising back in 1987. My first foray in advertising, I was a salesperson for a country radio station in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I spent over 20 years in the radio industry. Matter of fact, I left the industry right at the middle of 2010 when as we all know, when things were really squirrely in the economy. I was general manager for radio stations in South Florida. And as some cost cutting measures, as a lot of businesses have to do in tough times, they eliminated my position. Now, for those of you on this call who have ever been in a situation where you got a position eliminated, it takes you a couple of moments to decide what the future looks like. But I will tell you, my partner in the agency, Stephen Bergman, and I had known each other for a lot of years. I actually used to manage him in the radio landscape. But anyway, he started an agency, invited me to join. I did. We worked in the automotive space. And John is right. Back in September 2012 is exactly when it happened, when Star Performance Marketing got into the power sports side. Fast forward to today, we have roughly 155 active accounts in the vehicle space, 65 of them which are Harley Davidson franchises. We have about 7 marine stores and the rest automotive. So I guess it would be fair to say that claim to fame is that we work with anything with a VIN. And before anybody corrects me, I know that boats don't have VINs, they have hull numbers, but for the sake of this conversation, let's roll with it. Anything with a VIN. So, and as we talk today about generating demand in a tough market, first and foremost, working with as many dealers as I do in the 3 verticals, I think I would be fair to say it's a tough environment right now. And it's tough sometimes for an advertising agency to have the same appreciation, not being on the front line every day and dealing with customers. But I think all of you who know me know that our agency, we're really in the trenches with our dealers. So I think I got a really good sense of it's a tough environment. And just setting the stage before John and I actually get into, really defining what that tough market is, let's just roll back a few years. Right in 2019, pre-COVID, all of us, as I worked in this space, we were going through trying to figure out, could we get more leads in the top of the phone? People going to the website, people calling us on the phone, people walking in the store, so that obviously we could generate a brand inside of our DAT and get that to translate into motorcycle sales. And then I remember, like it was yesterday, towards the end of March in 2020, I sat with my partner, and I'm going to be honest with you, we had some very stressful conversations about what our future looked like. We didn't really lose any clients. We had about 100 clients then. Nobody fired us, but 70 or 80% of our clients overnight stopped advertising, and the ones that owed us money didn't pay us. So for a while, they ended up clearing things up, thank God, but it was dismal. Then we fast forward about 3 months into it when we figured out the sky really wasn't falling. It went on a 2-year run that in the Harley Davidson space, the dealer network as a whole, but especially the dealers that I work with, saw in some cases, the best times that they've ever seen, especially from a profitability standpoint. Potentially not on the unit volume, but we were in an environment, shall we say, that it was a seller's market. And I think inside of that seller's market, a lot of things changed. As I spoke with dealers, you just kind of the landscape of just inside of your business changed quite a bit. You lost some employees who, and so did we, that figured that sitting at home like people in some other industries were doing and, spending the stimulus money was more important than coming to work. So there were some definite shifts in the way that we do business. But I think I can say without any fear of contradiction is that we really settled in, and I hope no one takes offense to this, but we were in the order taking business. Truck rolled up, got the bikes off, and in a lot of cases, a significant amount of them were already stolen. If they weren't, they were sold within days of hitting the showroom. So it was okay that we didn't have as many fits. It was okay that we didn't go through as many touch points, you know, calling people on the phone, setting appointments, making sure that they showed, because we were figuring out a lot of different ways to sell the units. The demand was higher than the supply, and they were paying the money for it. So things were good. But let's fast forward. You know, today is August 17th, 2023. No stimulus money. And with that being the case now, I know as I speak with dealers, a lot of our customer base are struggling to make down payments like they were a couple of years ago. There's also a very huge demand on their discretionary income that wasn't there during COVID. People weren't going on vacations. They weren't going out to restaurants with the same frequency. They had eliminated some of the things that they were doing. People actually were saving money. I mean, I was reading articles of how people were opening checking accounts and, you know, who had never had them before, checking accounts, savings accounts. So there was money to be had. A lot of that now doesn't exist anymore. Energy cost is up. Interest rates are higher than they've been in the last 16 years in the United States. We have discussions of inflation all around us. And just overall, I think we can sum it up as the customer's buying power is not what it was in the last several years. So now, John, if you would advance the slide, let's talk about like 5 key areas that I think are really, that I believe are noteworthy when we talk about what a real tough environment is. As stated earlier, inflation and high interest rates. Well, I think that we really have 2 types of customers in today's market. I think you have that customer who has been accustomed to, you know, they got a good interest rate. They've typically been a tier 1 and a tier 2 customer. For you, they were paying 3, 4, 5% interest rate, and all of a sudden that same customer with the same type of credit portfolio, personally, they're paying north of 6, 7% interest rate. And there's a lot of those customers who just refuse to pay that kind of interest on borrowing money. Then you got the other side. That customer who potentially had damaged credit. They were accustomed to paying higher interest rates, so I'm not certain that higher interest rate has the exact same impact on them. But for that customer in the environment we're in right now, is getting the monthly payment. They don't have the down payment. They potentially don't have the trade equity in the bike to help bring down that finance amount. And now with interest rates where they are, and even the entry level of what bikes cost, they just can't stomach the monthly payment. So those economic headwinds have really, really thrown a curveball to a lot of us as dealers. Then internally at the dealership, let's look at your staffing. And I alluded to it earlier. A lot of changes happening. We lost a lot of experienced salespeople during COVID. We've not been able to replace that experience level, and even more specifically, as we brought on some green peas, they just don't understand coming from that environment of, it was a seller's market, now it's a buyer's market again. And you got to go through all of those touch points again. A lot of us as dealers now are struggling with getting enough manpower because, you know, we're back to one person represents 8 to 10 sales. So if you got to sell 60, 70 bikes a month and you got 2 or 3 salespeople, that's a tough formula. So getting the right amount of bandwidth just so that you can compete in today's environment. But then beyond that, inventory. Inventory is definitely better than it was several years back. But as I speak with dealers, at least in my network of dealers that I work with, the mix of inventory is still not optimal. But thank God we got a lot more things to sell than we have, both new and used. But I think what's really tough in today's environment, as new leadership at Harley, and they've really taken the brand and the models in some slightly different directions. And especially when you look at Sportsters and Softails, they're just the price point now. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, if you make any amount of profit now, you got to sell a bike for $17,000 out the door. And that's for your entry level bike. So we don't have that $10, $11, $12,000 bike anymore. So what I've seen, and I've seen it in a lot of DATs across the country. So if this is not happening in your DAT, it's not a roll call, but I've seen it enough, it's worth mentioning, is motorcycle sales and a lot of DATs are flat to only being down a couple percent. And if you're not paid attention to your market report, I would challenge you to go look at it. But what's happening is Harley has lost some significant share of market in a lot of DATs. And I don't think it's because people fell out of love with Harley. We didn't wake up one morning being dumber than what we were the day before. But in a lot of cases, people just now can't afford it. So what I've seen an increase in are things like Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, Can-Am, and a lot of it because of they have bikes with that entry level pricing. They got $10,000 bikes. So those enthusiasts who want a motorcycle, they're there. They're in your DAT. They potentially will be your customer again. But right now, a lot of people, just to satisfy their yearning to have a motorcycle in their garage, and they're having to now make hard decisions and make maybe Harley their next purchase. And then last but not least, as I look at a lot of dealerships, and I had my team put together, a report for me. So we looked at 50 dealers in our network, and we looked at the last 12 months, and we tried to see if we could find a discernible difference in the amount of web traffic, the unique visitors to the website, as it pertains to what it was the prior year. And I can say with clarity, overall, a lot of markets are flat, some are up, but I would say when I look at the big group, that 50, they were off about 10, 11% in unique visitors to the site. But I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing, and one of the things that we track for all of you guys who work with me on the call, we track, our goal is for 2% of unique visitors that come to the website to turn into a web lead of some sort. That number in a lot of cases is in half. So you're getting the web traffic, but they're not filling out the web leads with the same intensity that they were last year in the past. So that, in a lot of cases, John, is what I see are some of the factors and headwinds that we're facing right now when defining a tough market.
Yeah, Thomas, I would agree with all of those. I think what's interesting in there is we, as dealers or just business people in general, right, be mindful of what you can control and what you can't. Right, some of these things we can't control the economy, but we can do some messaging and some operational and procedural things to lessen the impact of that side of it. But from staffing, inventory management, what we're doing with our digital showroom from a web traffic standpoint and lead capture tools, some of those things are controllable. So I think that's one call out. I do find it really interesting, the staff piece, right? There's a fair number of frontline staff members, sales department obviously included, that had never worked in the motorcycle business in times other than COVID. Yeah. Right. So to them, this is really, really, really brutal. And to those of us that have been around for a while, it's like, no, this is just business as usual, right? This retail and motorcycle retail is a grind, and that's what it is right now. So got to kind of get their heads spun around, and we really have to be active and prospect and outreach and do things that we didn't do for about 3 years, because we could relax a little bit. Not saying everybody did, but we could have. And then I think that the one thing on the final piece there, the web traffic side, the good news there is there's still interest in this product, right? If we're seeing web traffic flat to marginally down, that doesn't mean people are tuning out. They just get to the site and some reason they're disqualifying themselves or opting not to raise their hand and become a lead. So I know you're going to get into a bit of that. So that's the demand, or the tough side. Let's just shift. I'm going to run you a slide forward and we'll hit on the demand piece, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, you can advance the slide if you would. So, I mean, I think demand in its purest form is, there is a customer inside of your area of influence that has decided on their own volition that I want to own a motorcycle. And I think that's what the decision, I mean, everybody makes that personal decision. So hopefully as dealers in your market, you've always got some level of share of voice in the marketplace trying to entice that potential customer to either trade in or trade up, or if they're not a motorcycle rider, to take a riding academy course if you offer it, or if you don't, somewhere in your market where you can get an endorsement to get involved in the sport so that ultimately they can experience the culture. But someone has to make a decision that now is the time for me to buy what you sell. Now, as it pertains to, I think, what we're on this call for, creating demand, really think about, you got a customer who's decided, I want to buy what you sell. The way that you're going to engage them, I think, is going to happen in 3 arenas. They're going to go to your website, hopefully fill out a lead, like we just talked about. Optimally, 2% of them fill out a lead, but even in a down market now, 1%. As long as you have some KPI that you can track, then you can kind of figure out how much you got to put in the top of the funnel. Or they can call you on the phone, or they can walk in the store. Now, one thing that I'm going to selfishly say on this call is that when you talk to a customer, regardless of how you advertise to them, and I know I talk with a lot of dealers and they relegate the success or failure of their advertising on how many leads they got, web leads. That's only a percentage of it. All of you guys are consumers on this call. You bought something. And I got to imagine, based on all the research I see, 75% of you probably have never filled out a lead form, or rarely fill out a lead form when you purchase things. So we got to look at all of the different touch points when we're trying to figure out where demand is and how we wrap our arms around demand. And John, if you kind of click on, one of those graphics, you'll see. Now this is just, and again, pull right out of a CRM, and there's no dealer name on it. So forget about the numbers on it per se. Let's just talk about someone is engaging a dealership. They're coming in the showroom, whether they came in, parts, service, and for whatever reason, there was a greet and you got them in your CRM to follow up, to sell them a bike. They filled out a lead form, some widget on your website, and it pops to your website and you got a lead. Well, they called you on the phone because customers have the right to engage you any way that they want. So embrace and really learn as a dealer or dealer network that you really got to service all 3 of those arenas at a very high level, or you could be losing demand or not capturing the maximum opportunities that the demand is creating for. Now, without getting too deep into this, maybe this is another call, John, but just because I deal with so many dealers, I will just kind of leave you with some nuggets here. On the showroom, what I typically see, and obviously you have highs and lows, but somewhere between 18 and 20% of showroom traffic would be my recommendation of what you should look for as a KPI to a conversion. For your internet leads, somewhere between 8 and 10%, plus 10%, I think in today's environment is you're cooking with gas. And if someone contacts you by phone, somewhere between 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4. So 20-25% of those should translate. And then when you look at your whole body of work, all touch points, somewhere between 14 and 15%. Now, I got to imagine some of you guys are probably looking at your CRMs now to see where you are, and you're saying, yeah, I'm good. But then there's probably others of us who say, wow, how do I get there? Well, I think, first and foremost is you decide, do you have a designated BDC person? Are you round robin your lead? Are you working with companies like Lead Helm to help you harness and capture those? But I really believe you gotta have a plan, and it's gotta be executed flawlessly in today's environment. But that would be what I would say, would is what demand looks like. Someone coming into your website, filling out a lead, walking into your store, calling you on the phone. That person who decided on their own volition that they want to buy what you sell, let's just keep in mind, there's someone north, east, west of you that probably sell the same thing. So we got to get them, we got to get to them quick, and we got to take that demand off the table before we lose it.
Yes. So Thomas, when we did this the other day together, I love the data side of it. So I think a couple pieces. We have to have data like this, right? To me, it's a necessity. We can't make good decisions. Hiring, coaching from a KPI standpoint, if I don't have data, objective information, it's hard for me. I'm handicapped in all of those areas. The other thing that comes out of here is we will see, as you can see in the conversion column, we see very different kinds of performance based on lead source. Okay, so a variety of reasons that people came into the showroom, a variety of reasons they call, and a variety of reasons and different campaigns and so forth that come through digital leads. So lead sources perform differently. I'd like to know how they perform. What's my ROI per lead source so I can funnel my money into the sources that produce the best results on that point, and the KPI piece, right? Who is the individual or team that's handling these leads, particularly on the digital side? It needs to be dedicated, right? Our strong belief, you mentioned it, Thomas, the round robin really is not effective. I need somebody dedicated to this space all the time. And then I can have data telling me, do I need more people, or how's the person I have actually performing in that role? So this, I love this stuff, love this stuff. All right, let's keep moving. And now you're going to move into a little bit more of what are we doing? What are the considerations, right, for how to optimize our spend, if you will, to drive additional demand? So why don't we move on to that? I think we're going to talk about some geographies here.
Yeah, so these next couple of slides, I want to leave behind for you guys just what we call 4 pillars of building a successful strategy to build demand and drive traffic to your website, to your phones, and walking in the door. And first and foremost, which I think actually is probably in today's world is the most important thing, is trying to dial in what makes the most sense for you to draw a circle, a geographical circle around as your trade zone. Now, we all got a DAT, but unfortunately, newsflash, I don't want to spoil everybody's Christmas and tell you there's no Santa, but customers don't know anything about DATs. They don't understand the boundary lines of where your DAT is versus your competitive dealership down the road. All they know is that I live here. If I travel 20 minutes north, I run into a store. If I travel 25 minutes to the south of me, there's another store. You guys sell the same thing. So we got to be really mindful when we're trying to create demand that we are competing for a customer's interest, and so is someone else. And not just in the Harley-Davidson world, we got other competitive brands. We got other, if you think about a Harley is purchased through a discretionary budget, there's a lot of other pressures on that discretionary budget. So the first thing I would say to all of us, let's figure out where 80% of our new and used motorcycle registrations happen at. I think our market report does a really good job of identifying for each of us exactly where our new units come from. But for a lot of dealers, 50 or more % of your sales happen with used too. So really wrap your arms around that. I would say in a lot of situations that I've seen it's a hand in glove fit. Where you sell new is usually where you sell used also. Now, once you figure that out, let's just make sure that when you're working either internally with your marketing team, or if you have an external team like a Star Performance Marketing, is that you really figure out when you're putting or casting a net for advertising, you can't go too big. I got to say that one again. You can't go too big, because invariably, as I brought a lot of clients on our roster over the years, typically when I talk to a client in the initial discovery meeting, as I ask the question, how do you plan on growing over the next 12 months? Usually, it's the dealer's belief that if I grow in different zip codes or areas around me, if I can do better in this zip code, if I can do better here, and usually they're farther out, that everything would be perfect. Well, in today's world, with rising cost of media, and all you guys probably deal with things like cost per point, cost per lead, cost per thousand, all of those metrics that measure just efficiencies. As all of those things go up, the farther you go out from your dealership, your cost of advertising is going to go up, because now you start to get closer to other dealers who are basically advertising to the same customer that you are, bidding on the same types of keywords that you are, and in a bid network, the cost then goes up. But here's the question I'm going to ask you. And you don't have to respond, but intuitively, I know the answer to this question. What's the value of a customer in a 10, 20, 30, 40-mile radius around your store as it pertains to the propensity or the likelihood that they will convert to a lead versus when you get out 60, 70, 80 miles away? Because in the digital landscape, people will click on your ad. They'll click on your ad. But the farther you are away, the likelihood that they'll convert to a web lead, phone call, or someone walking in your store goes down. It doesn't go to nil, but you got to make tough decisions. Because if you have a finite budget, which everyone does, and as you're advertising, you divide that by 30.4 is how many days in the month, you have a daily budget. Once you use up your daily budget, whether it's by 10 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, once that daily budget is consumed, everyone else in your market who is searching for what you sell, if you're expecting your digital footprint to help you out, you're out of money. So now you got to rely on things like, you better have a good brand, so they're typing in your name and coming to your website direct. You better have a good presence in SEO so they can find you in an index when they're searching organically. You better have a good referral network so that someone's telling them about them, giving a personal testimonial so that they're calling you. But if you don't have all those things, and a lot of us don't, if we don't have all those things, then we got to make really smart decisions with our advertising budget so that we can get it to convert at the highest level. So don't go out too far. You'll get clicks, they don't convert at the same level, but don't get too small either. Because then for those customers who have the ability to go north to south and pick a dealer, you might end up losing that jump ball more often than you want to. So I know now I just confused you. Don't go too big, don't go too small. So where do I go? John, click on one more time right on that slide. For all the dealers we work with, we map out their sales. Don't guess. Don't guess. Figure out over time, because success leaves a trail. So we have a proprietary dashboard that every dealer in our network has access to, and we work with them on dialing this in. But we look and we find out where 80% of the traffic comes from. What are your top performing zip codes? That's shown in that yellow. Green shows you the radius of how far around the dealership to get 80% of the sales. And then we break that same data up by counties. This is very methodical. John said it earlier, that you have to deal with data, because if you're not, you're playing Russian roulette with your advertising. So
that's pretty powerful right there, Thomas.
Yep.
So I have one simple takeaway from that discussion right there. You got to own your backyard first.
Got to own your backyard.
Right. Own your backyard. And if you own it and everybody's happy and all your penetrations and market shares are just top notch there, then have a discussion about where you go next. But own the backyard first. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. So now we looked at where we're going with our messaging. Let's talk about who we're targeting with our messaging here.
And if you advance the slide, I think this is pretty straightforward. I think everybody on the call would attest, and every market is going to be a little different, but there's enough similarities. When I make this statement, I hope everybody nods their head. White males 45 to 65 years old who earn between 50 and 60, $75,000 household income a year. That's your customer. Now, do we want other things? We absolutely do. But I suggest in today's world, especially as we're having to really watch what we spend, that every program that we do, we target that audience. And I think it's really important that we understand whether it's advertising. So advertising is really deemed as any message that goes outside of the building to try to attract someone back in the building should be targeting that customer profile. And then you have marketing. Marketing is all the efforts you do inside of your building to push the product out. Should also, all your marketing efforts should be generated or targeted towards a white male, 45 to 65-year-old who earns between $50,000 and $75,000 a year. This is not the time now to be rolling the dice and trying to try things, because that is the customer who rides Harley with a high level of frequency. So that's why I would say, John, that we need to live.
Yeah, Thomas, I concur there. I think nothing's easy, but I think this segment of the discussion is probably more clear for a Harley dealer, right? But I know we've got some multi-line metric dealers on here, right? And so then we've got product segments that fit all kinds of ages and probably different economic backgrounds. So that's a little muddier situation there. And again, I think it's just research into who are the customer profiles for the different segments, which segment is the biggest opportunity for you, and let's define those things and then direct our monies there. Again, let's own the biggest segment that's got the highest propensity to buy our product. And again, if we've got full penetration there, then we have the luxury of trying to branch out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So now we know where we're talking and we know who we're talking to. Let's look at what are we saying?
Well, this is the easy one. Easy for me to tell you what you should be saying. Now the words become a little tougher. The actual what you put on paper, whether it's graphically or in audio or video. But in today's world, that one word, attainability. Attainability. We have to figure out in today's environment, with all those headwinds that we described at the beginning of our discussion today, we have to figure out how we help Joe Public realize that I too can own a Harley Davidson motorcycle. I can realize my dream. I can get me a piece of the culture, and I can get it in my monthly budget. So on the screen, under that kind of concept of attainability, really think about, do you have the inventory? And not just enough of the inventory, the right inventory, whether it's new or used. And again, I know we talked about price points. Some of that is out of our control, but we really got to be mindful of what we got to sell. Then we also got to understand that dynamic of credit and how it relates to someone's payment, because that is a big deal in today's world. Interest rates, affordability, monthly payment. Then you get into down payments. And whether it's cash or trade equity, I think one of the things that, during COVID, a lot of dealers or a lot of customers were selling their bikes in a lot of cases for more than what they paid for it originally. A lot of that has gone away, and we're back to, I think still bikes are valued higher than they were pre-COVID, but it's not nearly where it was. But there's a lot of people who bought over the last several years who I think we could all agree are probably upside down. So that is something that we got to be sensitive to and mindful of. But we have to play in that theater of the mind. And we have to let customers know that you too can own a Harley. Let me show you how, with the bikes we got, with the finance programs we got, with the interest rates, and just with our ability and our experience to help put you riding. But let's just say, for instance, the customers decide they can't afford to buy right now. Well, then they got a service. So if you're not doing any or haven't done a good job with service messaging, now's the time. There's no better time than now. Because if you can create touch points for people doing service, and then ultimately down the road, when they make their next purchase, if they're servicing with you, it's a higher possibility that they might buy from you. But let's just forget down the road. Let's talk about today and creating touch points. Someone brings the bike in the service department. They got to do a couple $1,000s worth of repairs. All of a sudden, someone from the front of the house walks back. They run into a salesperson, and voila, they roll home with a new bike. It's a touch point. So it's just a matter of getting enough, again, back to getting enough fits, getting your processes dialed in so that we can take advantage of all of our touch points. So that's what I would say, as make sure that in your marketing efforts, that everybody in your community, in your DAT, in your area of influence, they know what you're about. What are you known for? What are you known for? And I think if you follow these bubbles on the screen and build your advertising around that, you will have a very robust recall inside of your market.
No, Thomas, I think the attainability piece is more significant now than we've seen in many, many, many years in the past. And I kind of wonder, it's kind of a self-reflection question for the audience here. Do you feel like on your websites that this message is prominent enough, right? Because again, as we said earlier, website traffic's fairly consistent, but we're not seeing as many people convert to leads as we historically do. Maybe if we get some more service messaging, maybe if we get some more attainability messaging in there, maybe we can drive that 1% to 1.2, 1.5, 1.7 and so forth. And then we're getting more return on that AdWords spend that we just talked about. So I think that's some great insight in there. And it's almost, we have to be a bit empathetic right now, right? Sympathy, no. I'm not going to say, no, you shouldn't buy this because you can't afford it. That's just doesn't make sense. But empathetically, look, I understand right now things are a bit different. We're going to do everything we can to get you on the right product at the right monthly payment for your budget, because that's how everybody lives. So I think this is a huge piece right here. So love that one. All right. We got some reach and some frequency now, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Well, all right.
Well, let's just and this is our last slide. So again, thank you guys for allowing us to, give you some different direction or maybe some food for thought. But in quick review, as you walk away, dial in. Where does it make the most sense for me to advertise and do my recruitment of new customers? Who inside of that geographical area makes the most sense? And depending on what product you sell, you gotta dial that in. What is it that you say to them? And my recommendation in today's world, attainability, attainability, attainability. And then last but not least, what media channels now make the most sense? Because there's a ton of ways to advertise. And I'm gonna go on record and saying, all advertising works. Anybody who works with me, which several of you guys do, you heard me say it. There is no such thing. Advertising never fails you. Because advertising role is not to sell a motorcycle or a boat or any retail product. Advertising's role is just to give you a channel to communicate. That's it. So as long as someone's on the other end receiving that message, advertising did what it's supposed to. So stop blaming advertising. What I will say to you, however, is you have to approach this strategically. And the first place you got to start, you got to have a budget. You got to be willing to invest in your own success. So what I might suggest to you is that there's three theories of how you come up with a budget. It's a percentage of gross, which not as many dealers use anymore, but it used to be 1.5%, 2.5% of your overall gross at the dealership. I think something that is widely used in today's environment is allocation per unit. And depending on where you're located geographically and what your competitive landscape and your cost of media is, I see that anywhere from $350 a unit up to $550 a unit. And then there's the WAG theory. Oh, wow, that's guess. That still way too many people do. So my message is come up with an advertising budget that you and your team can live with. And John, if you'll click one more time, give me 2 more minutes and I'm going to give everybody back their afternoon. So we talked about budgeting, and everybody who works with me, they've seen this exercise before. We start out every year and we adjust it multiple times during the year, but we start out every year. We say, how many motorcycles we want to sell new year this year? Then we go back and look at seasonality, because no 2 months are the same, and figure out what percentage of sales happen in each month. And then we break out our advertising efforts or budget to match hand in glove with the seasonality of our sales. Because you want to spend the most money in the months that you have the highest expectation of sales. So if your budget is broken out evenly for 12 months, I hope when you walk away from this that you have something actionable to do. Because I can tell you with clarity, I've done enough of these, and you know this intuitively. May does not look like January in any market from the standpoint of your ability to sell units. There's not as many customers who are going to buy in January as they are once you get in season in that March, April, May, June period. So there's where rubber has to really meet the road. So once you figure out, again, your distribution of budget, now you got to make hard decisions. How much of my overall budget do I allocate for advertising? Those are the things that happen outside of the building to pull people in, versus marketing, which in a lot of cases are events and promotion. Now, of course, I have an opinion, and doesn't mean that it works 100% of the time or will work for you. But one of the things I will say is be mindful of how much you put in your events and promotion. Ask yourself the question. And if you're as an owner or a GM are not on the front line and go to your event, have someone that does, and ask it, out of all the events we have, how much, when you look at your entire customer base, people you sold to, or people in your market who are part of the HIOs, Harleys in operations, or motorcycles in operation, what percentage of these people come to your events? Usually it's a small percent. A lot of times the same people who come over and over again. You can only sell that group of people so many things. You can do all the events in the world. You can't sell them 20 bikes. So you got to figure out a way to expand your reach. The way you do that is through advertising. Now, I'm not suggesting don't market, because that's the whole part of the culture. The bike nights, the bike washes, the rides. But be mindful of the fact, and especially what we said earlier with a lot of us dealing with not having enough fits. What happens if you get 200 people on your lot on a Saturday? Do you really sell more bikes? Can you get to them? Do you even get leads? Maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not there. But ask yourself a question. Go through the exercise. Figure out what works for you. But typically what I recommend to a dealer is that once you figure out your budget, number of units, time your allocation per unit, I usually recommend you spend 20% to events and promotion, 80% to advertising. Now on another meeting, maybe we'll go through and talk about these advertising channels. But on the screen, there's a lot of options of how you can advertise. But I will leave you with this. If you got a little bit of money or a lot of bit of money, take demand off the table first. And what I mean by that, for people who are in-market shoppers, figure out a way to get in front of them with the most robust share of voice that you can do. And there are media channels that do best at that. The absolute best is Google AdWords. Someone pick up a device, a cell phone, a tablet, or a PC. They type in the keyword, Harley-Davidson dealer near me, a brand, a finance term, something. They have shown intent. Your ad shows up to capture them and get them to your website. You get enough of them, the law of probability tells you you're gonna get a lead. You get a lead, you're gonna get them on the phone. Some of them, you're gonna set an appointment. Some of them are gonna come in, and by golly, you might sell something. That's how the process works. So I would say to you, take demand off the table first. And then skillfully, if you got money left over, then do things to create demand. People who potentially are not in market, but we could pull them in market with the right messaging or the right communication, they're in equity and they don't know it. They hadn't serviced in a while, we might be able to get in and flip them to a new bike. They have a high interest rate and potentially their credit has gotten better since the last time they purchased. We can get them in, get them on a new bike, potentially lower their interest rate, lower their payment in some cases. So there's ways of getting people who are not in market, who may be near market, back into market. That is creating demand. So what I would say is have a plan, do yourself a favor, work the plan, and if you don't have the bandwidth or the experience or the skill set to do it, there's a lot of agencies out there like ours. I love to talk to you, but if not me, talk to somebody to help you out. Just do not play Russian roulette with your advertising. That's all I got, John.
Thomas, great points. I remember these spreadsheets very, very well. We had monthly reviews on these with you for many, many, many years. So I got one more quick slide, and then if we've got any Q&A, we can hit that. But essentially, this slide right here, we always have one of these at the end, and this gives you an easy opportunity if you want to take a next step with anybody. On the left, if you want to connect with Thomas and his team at Star Performance Marketing for initial discussion, exploratory discussions, whatever, feel free to scan that QR code and it will link up and they will follow up with you there, right? What I said earlier on Lead Helm and Helm Academy, if we're driving this traffic, particularly digital traffic, and it is converting to leads, please scan the middle one or the one on the right for either more information or a direct sign up for Lead Helm. Our whole process, the software itself, that platform, and Helm Academy is designed specifically to help you maximize the opportunity that already exists inside your digital space. If we can get great at that, then we start to talk about how do we drive more traffic. But let's make sure we're maximizing the traffic that we have. So column 2, if you want to demo Lead Helm or just want to talk to somebody in more detail, you can scan that one. If you're ready to sign up and say, I need all this and the education that goes with it, you can scan the one on the right. So with that, I'm going to stop this share and we will be happy to hang around for